Why was the quietest analyst in the room watching everything so closely? She never spoke unless spoken to, never raised her voice, never tried to prove herself, but in the silence between keystrokes she seemed to see more than anyone else. Camp Meridian hummed like a hive in the desert heat, its towers and antennas rising out of the Syrian dust like a temporary city. Every screen flickered with maps and intercepted chatter. Every hand moved with purpose. And yet in the chaos of strategy, one woman moved differently. Fallon Collins, 23, barely 5 feet tall, a faint European lilt to her voice. And for 8 months the others had barely noticed her. To them, she was the bottom rung of the ladder, the analyst who cataloged reports, updated databases, and fetched the overflow work no one wanted. Her seat was tucked into the far corner, near the filing cabinets, a place designed for someone who didn't matter. But that was the mistake. Because Fallon Collins wasn't who they thought she was. Not really. Her file said Dublin, a degree in international relations, another in computer science, 4 languages, 8 months of steady, punctual service at Camp Meridian. She was thorough, reliable, a little too bookish. And in the private notes of Staff Sergeant Chun, her immediate supervisor, she was described with words that stung like a dismissal. Thorough, but unimaginative, is suited for administrative support, not strategic analysis. The label stuck. The senior analyst spoke over her in meetings. When she did contribute, they smiled politely and moved on as if she hadn't said anything at all. But Fallon never argued. She never corrected them. She wrote her neat little notes in a leather journal, and when asked, she nodded, quiet, respectful, invisible. At least that was what they saw. But at night, when the bass wound down, when the radios grew quiet, and the desert wind carried sand against steel, Fallon worked differently. Her walks along the perimeter looked like exercise. They were. She timed the guard rotations, counted the sensors, memorized blind spots. She kept maps hidden in her quarters, maps layered with details that didn't appear in any official briefing, alternate routes through mountains, hidden water sources, shelters carved into the land itself. The laptop she used to email her family connected elsewhere, into networks her colleagues didn't know existed, channels she had no clearance to access. On those nights, her pale green eyes scanned feeds most Marines would never see. She stitched together a picture they didn't even realize was missing. Fallon wasn't studying for the sake of curiosity. She was preparing. For what? No one knew. Not even Fallon could answer in words. But she carried the certainty that something was coming. And when it did, she couldn't be the invisible analyst anymore. That morning, the desert sun cut long shadows across the motor pool. Inside, the briefing room was filled with the low thrum of voices. Colonel Marcus Reed presided at the head of the table, posture sharp, his tone steady. He'd commanded Camp Meridian for 14 months. Knew every name, every face. He believed nothing slipped past him, but even he hadn't looked closely enough at the girl in the back. The briefing moved as it always did. Reports from signals, tactical assessments, maps spread across polished wood, blue marks for friendly positions, red for known threats, gray swaths of uncertainty stretching across the mountains like a warning. Thompson, the lead tactical analyst, pointed to one of those gray zones. Biggest vulnerability here, 15 kilometers of terrain without consistent surveillance. If the insurgents move, they'll use this gap. Rebecca Santos, signals intelligence, tapped her tablet. Intercepted chatter suggests coordination, but no indication of timing yet. Captain Rodriguez added his voice, calm but concerned. Local sources haven't flagged anything unusual. Either they've missed it or they've been cut out. Neither's good. Reed nodded. His philosophy was simple. You built certainty out of fragments. You pieced order out of chaos. That was how you saved lives. From the back, Fallon raised her hand. Her voice, when it came, was soft, almost hesitant. Sir, the assumption that they'll take the main gap holds if they're moving large units. But the terrain supports smaller teams, trained ones, who could bypass detection through alternate routes, routes we don't cover. The room stilled for a moment. Thompson glanced back at her, lips tight with the kind of smile you gave to a rookie. Collins, those routes require technical climbing skills. Insurgents don't have that capacity. With respect, sir, Fallon replied, her words careful but steady. Some of these groups have adapted. They've trained with former military. If they wanted to move quietly, those routes are viable. Santos shook her head, indulgent. An interesting theory, but no evidence supports it. We have to focus on what's probable, not what's possible. And then came the dismissal. Staff Sergeant Chun's voice, calm, firm, final. Thank you, Collins, but operational planning is the responsibility of senior personnel. Please stick to your role. The looks that followed were polite, condescending. She knew them well. Bright but naive, thorough but impractical. She lowered her hand, wrote something in her journal, stayed silent. But inside, Fallon's chest burned. Not because she wanted recognition, but because she knew they were wrong. She had seen the maps, read the chatter between lines, tracked the adaptation of fighters no one else believed capable, and she knew the cost of their dismissal would not be measured in failed theories but in lives. Still, she said nothing. After the meeting, fragments of conversation floated through the hall, Thompson muttering to Rodriguez about her textbook overthinking. Chun reminding Williams from logistics that junior analysts need to focus on what matters, not indulge in hypotheticals. Fallon walked past them without reaction. She'd heard worse. The sting was familiar, but silence was safer. That afternoon, in the small library tucked away near admin, she sat with another tactical manual, flipping pages with the kind of attention no one expected from a support analyst. Maps lay folded in her lap, coded with tiny notations in pencil. She studied. She prepared, because she knew something no one else seemed willing to admit. The enemy was changing, and the Marines were not ready. When dusk fell, she traced her route around the perimeter again. The guards nodded, half distracted. To them, it was just Collins with her exercise routine. But her eyes caught the gaps in the searchlights, the rhythm of footsteps, the blind spots in cameras. Preparation, always preparation. Later in her quarters, her roommates already asleep, Fallon opened her laptop under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Fingers typed fast, steady. She sifted through encrypted feeds, cross-checked chatter, built her own models. Her maps spread across the desk, pinned by regulation manuals and a folded shirt. On them, she marked X's where patrols could vanish without a trace, places that didn't appear in official reports, places no one had considered. And when she leaned back in the chair, the desert night pressing in through the thin walls, her heart carried both weight and certainty. They thought she was just an analyst, but Fallon Collins knew better. She wasn't here by chance. She wasn't here to file reports. She was here for the moment when everything failed. And when that moment came, she wouldn't be Collins, the invisible European girl in the corner. She would be Phantom 7. But no one knew that yet, not even the colonel who thought he saw everything. She stood alone at the back of the room again. The discussion swirled around her, satellite feeds, signal intercepts, predictions about enemy movement. Maps flickered red and blue. Decisions were being made. But once more, Fallon's voice wasn't part of them. Staff Sergeant Chun read assignments from her clipboard, sharp and efficient. Thompson, lead the support team. Santos, signals coordination. Rodriguez, human intelligence liaison. Williams, logistics. Name after name, responsibility after responsibility, and then silence, Fallon's name never called. She was back to the same routine, cataloging reports, maintaining databases, peripheral, invisible. It should have been expected after 8 months, but the sting still cut. Fallon kept her face calm. She nodded, as if the omission didn't matter, but inside the ache spread deeper, not because she craved recognition, but because the wasted potential pressed against her ribs like a weight. She had insights no one else would touch, alternate infiltration routes she'd mapped herself, movement patterns invisible to others, cultural nuances that never reached the official reports. She had solutions, she knew it. But no one wanted them. 2 days later, another exclusion. A joint operation with Allied forces needed liaison officers. The task demanded languages and cultural fluency. Fallon had both, fluent Arabic, French, Gaelic, the subtle dialects most couldn't even recognize. But the assignment went elsewhere, to Marines who would need translators and cultural briefings just to tread water. Fallon carried the papers to her desk, stacking them neatly as if it were just another day. But in her mind, she saw the missed opportunities piling higher and higher. And she wondered, not for the first time, if waiting was a mistake. That night she stayed later in the library. Rows of manuals and histories surrounded her. To a passerby, she looked like a diligent student, maybe a little odd for an analyst. But each page she turned fed into a larger puzzle no one else was working on. Enemy adaptation, terrain vulnerabilities, extraction points hidden in maps others ignored. She wasn't gathering trivia, she was building a lifeline for the moment when everything collapsed. But to everyone else, she was just Fallon Collins, the quiet girl with too many books and not enough real-world sense. It was Rodriguez who first noticed the cracks in the narrative. Reviewing reports, he spotted details that didn't match. Extra insight buried in drafts, terrain notes he hadn't written, cultural markers he hadn't flagged. "Funny," he said to Thompson during a coordination meeting. "Collins keeps asking about operational protocols, more detail than her role needs, and some of these reports, they've got her fingerprints on them, don't they?" Thompson frowned. She's been curious, terrain analysis, planning details, stuff outside her lane. I assumed Chun was keeping her in check. But Chun wasn't, not completely, because Fallon wasn't just asking questions. She was contributing, quietly feeding information into senior products, unattributed. Background research, supplementary notes, careful details slipped between the cracks. When Chun discovered it, she saw danger, not potential. She's overstepping, providing analysis outside her authority. That's not initiative, that's confusion, or worse, ambition. The whisper spread. Collins didn't understand boundaries. She stayed late, asked too many questions, walked the perimeter at odd hours, studied technical manuals like she wanted to be something she was. To Reed, it became a concern. "Collins," he said, summoning her to his office. His tone was cool, measured. "You've been here long enough to understand the structure, yet you're asking tactical questions, studying material outside your scope, contributing to reports without authorization. That isn't how we operate." She sat straight in the chair, uniform pressed, eyes steady. "Sir, I only want to ensure my work contributes fully to the mission." "That's not your role," Reed replied. "Effectiveness depends on order, boundaries, clear authority. You stay within your lane, do your assigned duties, leave strategy to those with the experience." The words were meant as guidance. They landed like a cage snapping shut. No more questions, no more research, no more pushing beyond her box. Reed called it a counseling session. But the warning was clear: try again, and it would end in disciplinary action. She left the office with her face composed, but inside something broke. Not because she'd been silenced, she'd lived in silence for months, but because she could feel it coming. The moment she had been preparing for since the day she arrived. The moment where the structure they clung to would not be enough. And now she was forbidden from acting. She walked back to her desk as the sun slid down the horizon, mocking her through the glass. The restriction pressed against her chest. Do nothing. Stay small. Pretend. But her mind whispered something else. What happens when they fail? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The alarm hit at 13:47 hours. A piercing wail that cut through the heat and shattered routine. Radios flared alive. Boots pounded against concrete. Fallon looked up from her desk, heart racing. The words echoed through every speaker. All units code red. Patrol Bravo 7 has failed to report. Last known position, Sector 9. All available assets respond. Her breath caught Sector 9. The coordinates rattled in her head. She knew them by heart. The ravines, the blind routes, the terrain that official maps smoothed over, but she had studied until her eyes blurred. She knew what it meant. 12 Marines, missing, in ground that could swallow them whole. And Fallon Collins was the only one on base who knew exactly how. The command center shook with urgency. Screens lit up, radios screamed with static, maps redrew themselves as fast as hands could pin them. Colonel Reed stood at the front, jaw locked, voice steady but harder than usual. Gentlemen, ladies, we have 12 Marines missing in hostile terrain, last confirmed at Checkpoint Charlie. They should have reached Delta hours ago. Weather clear, comms normal, no sign of equipment failure, yet nothing. I don't have to tell you what that means. The air thinned. Every analyst, every officer felt the weight pressing down. 12 lives, maybe captured, maybe gone already. Air operations reported in first. 2 helicopters running search grids, expanding drone coverage. No visual. Emergency beacons, Reed asked. Negative, no signal, either damaged or blocked. No one wanted to finish the thought. Fallon listened from the back, her notebook open though her pen didn't move. Her eyes fixed on the digital map. The northern ravines glowed on the screen, a place others skimmed past as routine, but she knew better. Those paths were traps, narrow, shadowed, easy to disappear into. She walked them in her mind 100 times, planned for this exact scenario. But now she had to watch as the experts dismissed it again. Thompson cleared his throat. Sir, the patrol route through Sector 9 is established. We've used it for months without incident. Challenging, yes, but safe. There's no precedent for trouble there. Fallon's chest tightened. They didn't see it. They couldn't. She spoke before she could stop herself. Her voice was calm, steady. Sir, the ravines block line of sight. Comms would fail there. If Bravo 7 deviated even slightly, they could be trapped beyond aerial reach. Standard routes won't find them. All eyes turned. The quiet girl again, the one they'd learned to brush aside. Thompson scoffed, frustration sharp. Colonel, with respect, she's a junior analyst. No field experience. No rescue training. This is speculation. Santos added quickly. Even if she's right, we can't send someone without authorization into hostile terrain. It would be reckless. Fallon kept her eyes on Reed. Her hands were steady, her voice quiet but firm. Sir, I can reach them. 4 hours using climbing routes that bypass the obstacles. I've prepared equipment, medical kits, extraction systems. I can get to Bravo 7 before they're lost. The silence after her words was heavier than the alarms. Colonel Reed studied her. His eyes narrowed, searching her face for hesitation, for weakness. There was none. Collins, his voice carried the weight of command. Are you telling me you've been concealing military qualifications? No, sir. Her voice didn't break. I'm telling you I've developed capabilities beyond my assignment. They're not on paper, but they're real, and they're ready. Santos's tone was sharp, accusatory. That sounds like deception, Colonel. If she's been hiding skills, how can we trust her now? How many other secrets does she have? Fallon's heart thudded, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. She saw the faces of 12 men she'd never even met, waiting in the dark, losing minutes they couldn't afford. Sir, she said softly, with respect, Bravo 7 doesn't have 12 hours. They may not have 6. Air can't reach them. Ground teams won't get there in time. I can. Let me go. Thompson snapped. It's madness. You'll add 1 more body to the count. 13 dead instead of 12. Reed looked at his watch. Minutes bleeding away, choices narrowing. And then the radio cracked alive. Static drowned the words, but the message broke through in fragments. Base command, condition worsening, immediate, cannot hold position much longer. The voice faded into static. The room froze. Fallon's hand curled around her pen, knuckles white. She forced her voice through the silence. "Sir, they're alive, but not for long, let me go." Colonel Reed's eyes locked on hers. Behind his discipline, something shifted, calculation, yes, but also doubt. And beneath it, the faintest trace of recognition. But when he spoke, his tone was cold, decisive. "Collins, I cannot authorize an unauthorized rescue mission. Not from you, not like this." The decision was made. Command had spoken. But in Fallon's chest, another decision formed, quieter but absolute. She had prepared for this moment since the day she set foot in Camp Meridian. And if she obeyed, 12 men would die. Orders were clear, boundaries were iron. But sometimes boundaries were wrong. She lowered her gaze. "Yes, sir." Her voice was obedient, calm, but her mind was already leaving the room, already in the ravines, already climbing into the dark. They thought the conversation was over. But Fallon Collins wasn't finished. Not yet. The base roared with controlled panic. Radio chatter cut the air into pieces. Search grids redrew across glowing maps. Helicopters came and went, stirring the desert with their blades. Every eye stayed fixed on the official rescue effort. Every voice repeated the same plan, the same hope, the same lie that help would arrive in time. But Fallon knew the truth. 12 hours, maybe 16. That's what the ground units needed to reach the ravines. By then, Bravo 7 would be gone. She walked calmly through the corridor, her notebook tucked under her arm like always. No one looked at her twice. She was invisible again, just Collins, the analyst who didn't belong. Her quarters were empty when she entered. The door clicked shut behind her, muffling the chaos of the base. Her hands moved quickly, practiced. The climbing harness slid free from its hiding place under folded uniforms, carabiners, ropes, gloves worn soft from nights of training no one saw, medical kits, rations, the beacon she had kept wrapped in a sock. Every piece chosen for this moment. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with something sharper, the weight of the choice. She was breaking the line. She was crossing the boundary command had drawn like barbed wire around her. If she failed, she would die. If she succeeded, she might never wear the uniform again. But 12 Marines were waiting in the dark, and for her, that was enough. The desert night wrapped her as she moved toward the perimeter. Guards nodded, distracted, minds on the crisis. No one questioned the small analyst out for another perimeter walk. She had rehearsed this 100 times. Same route, same timing, no suspicion. At the final checkpoint, the guard gave her a tired smile. "Long day, huh?" She nodded once, kept walking, and when the shadows swallowed her, she turned off the path and vanished into the dark. Her boots found the rhythm of sand and stone. Her pack pressed against her back, heavy but balanced. The desert stretched endless, the stars cold above. The sound of helicopters faded until only the wind remained. Alone at last. Her lungs burned but steady. Her legs carried her over terrain she had memorized by heart. Each landmark was familiar, rehearsed in daylight and studied by night on maps spread across her desk. 2 hours in, she reached the first ridge. The ravines loomed ahead, jagged and black, their shadows swallowing the moonlight. She paused, drinking water, checking gear, hands methodical, breath controlled. And for a moment, the silence pressed against her. She thought of Reed's face, hard and unyielding, of Chun's warning, of the quiet contempt of her colleagues. "Stay in your lane, do your job, don't step out of line." But Fallon had lived her life in lines drawn by others, and tonight she erased them. Her gloved hands found stone. She clipped her rope, set her anchors, leaned back into the void. The descent began. The rope sang softly against rock. Her body moved in rhythm, practiced and precise. No hesitation. She had done this in training, in preparation, alone in the shadows where no one believed she belonged. Down into the dark, where echoes lived. Every meter deeper, the ravine swallowed sound. The world above faded. Only her breath and the creak of rope remained. At the base, she unclipped, crouched low. Sand shifted beneath her boots. She scanned the walls with her light, narrow, jagged, unforgiving, a place where signals died and men could vanish. She pressed forward. Hours blurred, step after step through shadowed passages, each turn chosen from memory and instinct. Twice she paused, crouched, listening, movement above. Loose rock, not natural, someone else was here. Her heart stilled, but her body stayed frozen. The ravines carried whispers, insurgents maybe, watching, waiting. If they had Bravo 7, they would use the terrain like a cage. Fallon's fingers brushed her sidearm. She had no illusion of superiority. 12 against 1 was impossible, but her advantage wasn't firepower. It was silence, preparation, the ability to move where they would not expect. She slipped deeper into the labyrinth. And as the night stretched on, fatigue pressed heavy. Her shoulders ached, her legs trembled, sweat chilled against her skin in the desert cold. But her mind repeated the same steady beat, keep moving. They're waiting. At 300 hours, she found the first sign. A scrap of fabric torn against rock, marine issue. She crouched low, fingers brushing it gently, not long abandoned. Her chest tightened, they were close. She pushed forward, slower now, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Every shadow held danger. Every sound could mean ambush. Then she heard it faint, almost lost beneath the wind. A voice, weak, ragged. "Help!" Her throat caught. She followed, careful, edging between stone walls until the passage widened. And there they were. Bravo 7. Huddled in the base of the ravine, figures slumped together. Some conscious, some not. Faces pale under the moonlight. Bandages improvised, blood dried on sleeves. Exhausted, broken, but alive. Her heart surged and shattered all at once. She stepped forward, slow, steady. One of the Marines raised his head, eyes blinking against the dark. "Who's there?" he rasped. Fallon knelt, voice soft. "Quiet, I'm here to get you out." The man stared, disbelief cutting through exhaustion. "Who the hell are you?" For a moment, silence. Then she whispered it, the name she had carried in secret, the truth no one at Camp Meridian knew. Phantom 7. His eyes widened, but before he could speak, Fallon's hands were already moving, checking wounds, unrolling splints, pulling gear from her pack. No more waiting, no more silence. The mission had begun. The ravine swallowed sound. Above them, the desert stretched wide and empty. But here the world was narrow, jagged, suffocating. Fallon crouched among the 12 Marines, her hands moving fast, steady, checking pulses, assessing wounds, broken leg, dislocated shoulder, 2 with concussions, 1 barely conscious from blood loss. They had rationed water, stripped gear to survive, but they were running out of time. Their eyes followed her with confusion. Who was this small, quiet figure, pulling bandages from a pack, checking vitals with the precision of a medic, the calm of someone who had seen worse? Corporal Jenkins, his leg bent at a wrong angle, gritted his teeth. "You're not supposed to be here." Fallon looked at him, her voice quiet, almost gentle. "Neither are you, let's fix that." Her fingers wrapped the splint tight, steady despite his groans. Every move was calculated, not rushed, not hesitant, controlled. Another Marine, Staff Sergeant Morrison, shifted painfully against the wall, his suspicion cutting through the haze. "Who the hell sent you? Read. Command." She shook her head once. "No one sent me." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Then what the hell are you doing here?" Fallon met his eyes, calm, direct. "Getting you out, that's all that matters." The Marines exchanged glances, disbelief, suspicion. something bordering on hope. They had been abandoned in silence for hours, their comms dead, their flares useless. And now, out of the dark, a stranger had come. One with climbing ropes, medical supplies, maps memorized into muscle. One who called herself Phantom 7. Fallon didn't waste time explaining. She didn't have time. She set anchors, her hands precise in the glow of her headlamp. Each rope tested, each knot double-checked. She mapped the sequence in her mind. The injured first, the strong last, Morrison at the end to keep discipline until every man was safe. "Listen," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "We move one at a time, 12 minutes per extraction. You'll trust the rope, you'll trust me. No hesitation. If we fail, we don't get a second chance." The men nodded slowly. No one argued. They were too weak, too desperate, too far past doubt to refuse the only chance left. Fallon started with Jenkins. His leg was a mess but stable enough to move. She strapped him into the harness, adjusted the splints, whispered instructions. His face was pale, but he nodded, jaw clenched. "Breathe," she told him. "The rope holds, I hold." And then he rose. The winch system she had designed in secret bore his weight inch by inch, rope creaking, stone groaning. Fallon's muscles screamed as she guided the system, steady, relentless. Every second stretched into eternity. If an anchor slipped, if a knot failed, he would fall. But it held. 12 minutes later, Jenkins rolled onto the upper ridge safe. His groans carried down the wall, but so did something else, a cheer, hoarse but alive. The others watched with wide eyes. Belief flickered where suspicion had lived. "Next," Fallon said, "no pause, no break." One by one she lifted them. A Marine with a shattered arm, another with shrapnel buried in his side. Each man clipped into her system, lifted inch by inch from the grave of stone. Each time Fallon's body burned, arms raw, lungs clawing for air. But her face never broke. Minutes turned into hours. The ravine's silence was filled with groans, rope strain, the steady rhythm of survival. And slowly, the Marines began to see her differently. The small girl from nowhere, the quiet one, not weak, not naive, but unyielding. By the 8th extraction, her hands bled where the gloves wore through. Her breaths came ragged, sweat chilled against her spine, but her voice stayed steady, always the same. "Breathe, trust the rope, trust me." And they did. Staff Sergeant Morrison refused to go until the last. He watched her, studied her, disbelief etched into every line of his face. But he gave no order to stop, not when every man she sent up returned alive. When the 11th Marine vanished over the ridge, Fallon crouched by Morrison. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, but her voice stayed even. "Your turn." He shook his head. "No, yours, you've done enough, you go, I'll wait." Her pale green eyes locked on his, calm but fierce. "I don't leave people behind, strap in." For the first time, Morrison hesitated. Not out of doubt, but something else, a flicker of respect. "Phantom 7, he muttered, strapping the harness across his chest. "Whoever you are, you're not supposed to exist." Fallon tightened the straps. Her answer was quiet but sharp as stone. "I exist because you need me to." Minutes later, Morrison rose into the dark, his boots scraping against the wall until strong hands pulled him over the ridge. He vanished. Fallon was alone at the bottom. Her muscles quivered, her vision blurred. But she clipped the harness across her chest, tied herself in, and began the climb. Hand over hand, rope biting her palms. Every inch a war against gravity, against fatigue, against the weight of 12 lives carried in her memory. Her arms shook, her breath rasped, but her mind whispered the same truth it always had: preparation, determination, no retreat. And when she reached the ridge, when her hands clawed over the edge, 12 Marines stood waiting. Bruised, broken, bleeding, but alive. Alive because she refused to obey the limits they gave her. Staff Sergeant Morrison knelt, offering his hand. She took it, pulling herself onto solid ground. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes held steady. He stared at her, disbelief mingling with something harder, awe. "Phantom 7, he said quietly. "Who are you really?" She looked at him, her voice soft but final. "I'm the one who was ready when no one else was." No explanation, no boast, just truth. The Marines leaned on each other, forming a ragged line in the moonlight. Fallon activated her beacon, sending the coordinates into the night sky, a signal for the helicopters circling far above. When the rescue crews arrived, they expected broken men barely clinging to life. Instead, they found a unit already treated, stabilized, organized, standing beside a stranger who disappeared before they could ask her name. But the Marines knew. They had seen her in the shadows, heard her voice steady against the dark. Phantom 7. The ghost who had come when no one else could. The thrum of rotors broke the silence. Dust whipped across the ridge, swirling around the wounded men who shielded their faces as the helicopters dropped into the landing zone. Searchlights cut through the dark. The long-awaited rescue had arrived. But what they found wasn't what they expected. Captain Williams, piloting the lead aircraft, scanned the scene as his crew lowered. He expected chaos. Marines scattered, panic, critical injuries untreated. Instead, he saw something else: 12 men in formation, wounds stabilized, gear stacked neatly, ready for extraction. They weren't dying, they were waiting. And standing a few meters back, half shrouded in shadow, was a figure with climbing harness and bloodied gloves. Williams blinked, stunned. "Base Command, Rescue 6. Situation unusual. Bravo 7 is alive and stabilized. Looks like someone already pulled them out." Static crackled back, then Colonel Reed's voice, tight with disbelief. "Repeat that, Rescue 6. Williams hesitated, his eyes strained through the dust. The figure lingered at the edge of the floodlight, watching, small, quiet, almost spectral. "Sir, there's someone here," but he stopped. Because as he spoke, the figure turned. Pale eyes caught the light, and then just as quickly she vanished into the darkness. "Correction," Williams said slowly. "Unknown rescuer, gone before we could identify." The radio went silent for a moment, then Reed's voice again, sharp with command. "Rescue 6, don't chase. Bring my Marines home, we'll sort the rest later." The crew moved fast. Jenkins was lifted first, legs secured, his face pale but set. One after another, the men were winched aboard, each carrying wounds but also something more, a story burning in their eyes. Morrison was last, gripping the hand of a crewman as he climbed in. He turned once, searching the ridge, but there was nothing there, only wind, dust, and silence. By 200 hours, Bravo 7 was en route to Camp Meridian, alive, against every expectation. Alive because of her. Fallon took the long route back, alone, through side gullies and ridges no one patrolled. Her legs trembled, her body screamed, but her mind was calm. She had done it. By the time she slipped through the perimeter again, the base was roaring with energy. Medics rushed Bravo 7 into triage. Officers crowded the command center, demanding answers. Reports flew, contradicting, incomplete. Fallon walked through it unnoticed. Just Collins again. Just the quiet analyst returning from her late perimeter walk. Her quarters were empty. She stripped the harness, wiped the blood from her gloves, stowed every piece where it belonged. By dawn, her desk was neat again, her maps hidden, her face composed. No one asked where she had been, no one thought to. But the story spread anyway. At the morning briefing, Colonel Reed addressed the base. His face was harder than usual, his voice clipped. "Bravo 7 is alive, extraction successful, but questions remain." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Before our aircraft arrived, an unknown individual reached the patrol, provided medical care, conducted a professional-grade extraction from an inaccessible ravine. Whoever it was, they had training, equipment, knowledge of terrain we hadn't covered." The room buzzed with whispers. An unknown rescuer, alone. It sounded impossible. Staff Sergeant Chun spoke first, voice controlled but uneasy. "Sir, the rescue required climbing systems and advanced trauma care. That's not coincidence. Someone here has those skills." Thompson leaned forward, skeptical. Then why hide? Why not step forward? Unless they weren't supposed to be there in the first place. "Exactly," Santos added. "Whoever did this broke protocol. Unauthorized departure. Unauthorized operation. That's not initiative, that's insubordination." Reed let them argue for a moment. Then he cut through the noise. "Effective immediately, every person on this base will be interviewed. Every movement during the rescue window accounted for. If someone here went rogue, I'll know." Fallon sat at the back as always. Her pen scratched notes in her leather journal, calm, invisible. But her heart beat faster, because she knew what came next. Interviews, questions, patterns noticed. Already whispers were circling about her. The girl with unusual habits, the one who studied too late, asked too much, walked the perimeter every night. They had dismissed her before, but now they were looking. After the briefing, Morrison stood before Reed in the command tent, his face lined but alive. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Sir, with respect, whoever that was, they saved us. Without them, Bravo 7 doesn't make it back. We owe them everything." Reed's gaze sharpened. "Did you see who?" Morrison hesitated. He saw her face again, small, calm, hands steady on his harness as she strapped him in, her voice when he'd asked her name. "Phantom 7. But he chose silence. "No, sir," he said finally. "They never gave me a name." Reed studied him for a long moment, suspicion flickering. Then he nodded. "Dismissed." Back in her corner, Fallon listened as rumors rippled through the analysts. Some swore it was special forces operating off books. Others said Allied operatives, a ghost unit, a phantom. Fallon kept her eyes on her notes, kept her breathing steady. But Morrison found her later, alone in the corridor. He didn't speak at first, just studied her face, searching. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "It was you, wasn't it?" Fallon didn't look up. "I don't know what you mean, Staff Sergeant." He stepped closer, lowering his tone even further. "You saved us. Don't bother denying it. I saw your eyes in the dark." She paused, closed her journal slowly, then met his gaze. Her voice was calm, almost tender. "Sometimes, Sergeant, the truth is less important than the lives that come home. Let that be enough." And before he could answer, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the noise of the base. He watched her go, a question burning in his chest. "Who are you, really?" But she had already given him the only answer he would ever get. Phantom 7. The base didn't sleep. Even after Bravo 7's return, the camp pulsed with restless energy. Men moved with purpose, but beneath it ran a thread of unease. Not about the enemy this time, about the rescuer. About the ghost who had walked out of the night and pulled 12 Marines back from death. Colonel Reed wanted answers, and he wanted them yesterday. One by one, personnel were pulled into the interview tent. Questions sharp, eyes sharper. "Where were you between 2100 and 400? Who saw you? What equipment did you check out?" Most had alibis. The cooks, the medics, the drone operators with logs to prove every minute of their shifts. But when Fallon Collins sat across from him, the air changed. She looked as she always did, uniform crisp, journal tucked under her arm, eyes calm and unflinching. Too calm, Reed thought. He leaned forward, hands folded. "Collins, you've been here long enough to know how this works. A patrol vanishes, then returns with an impossible story. Someone reached them first. Someone who knew the terrain better than we did. Someone who had training, gear, and intent. You understand why I need answers." She nodded once. "Yes, sir." "Then tell me," Reed said, his voice quiet but cutting, "where were you last night?" Fallon's voice was steady. "In my quarters, sir. reviewed reports until 2300, then perimeter walk as usual, returned just after 200, slept until reveille. Reed studied her. Anyone confirm that? She paused, but not long enough to betray nerves. I passed Corporal Diaz on the south perimeter. He nodded to me. Reed checked his notes. Diaz had indeed logged her passing. Routine, nothing unusual. But Reed wasn't satisfied. He leaned closer. Collins, I'll be blunt. Men don't climb ravines on broken bones and crawl out alive without help. Whoever this Phantom 7 is, they weren't improvising. They knew what they were doing. That takes preparation, study, time. You've been noticed for spending long nights on maps and manuals, for asking questions outside your role, for walking the perimeter alone. His eyes narrowed. Are you going to tell me that's all coincidence? Her heartbeat quickened, but her face stayed calm. I study because I don't like being unprepared, sir. If that's suspicion, I accept it. But I am what I've always been here, just Collins. Nothing more. The lie slid out with the ease of truth. Reed's jaw tightened. He had no proof, only instincts, and instincts weren't enough to tear apart a soldier's career. He dismissed her, but his eyes followed as she left, sharp, calculating. Fallon walked out into the sun, her face still a mask, but inside the walls pressed tighter. Reed wasn't done. He was circling, watching for the crack. That evening she returned to her desk as if nothing had happened. Pages of reports spread before her. Her pen moved in neat lines, steady, deliberate, but her mind drifted. She remembered the weight of the rope in her hands, the strain in her muscles, the way Morrison's voice broke when she strapped him into the harness. Those men were alive because she had refused to obey silence. And now, silence was the only thing keeping her safe. The door creaked. Fallon glanced up. Morrison stood there, leaning on a crutch, his face pale but his eyes sharp. Word is, Reed's not letting this go, he said quietly. Fallon didn't answer. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You saved us, and I won't let him hang you for it, not after what you did. Her eyes met his, calm, searching. Then don't say anything, not to anyone. The less they know, the safer you are, the safer I am. Morrison hesitated. He wanted to push, to demand why she hid, to demand the truth about Phantom 7, but something in her eyes stopped him, not fear, not shame, something deeper, a kind of resignation. As if she knew her place in this story would always be shadow. He nodded slowly, understood. And he left, limping into the night. But word spread anyway. The men of Bravo 7 spoke in whispers, in guarded voices, about the figure who had carried them out, about the phantom in the ravines. Rumors traveled fast in military camps. Some called her special forces, a spook unit buried in black budgets. Others said she wasn't military at all, a CIA ghost, a contracted phantom. But among Bravo 7, there was no doubt. They knew the voice that had steadied them in the dark. They knew the hands that had bound their wounds and pulled them into the light. Still, none of them spoke her name. Reed kept pushing, reports stacked on his desk, time logs, equipment audits. None pointed to Collins directly, but none cleared her either. And in the silence of his tent, he muttered to himself, almost bitter, Phantom 7, whoever you are, you've made me question everything. For Fallon, the days blurred into routine again. Desk work, reports, perimeter walks, invisible once more, but the weight never left. She knew the truth couldn't hide forever. The Marines she had saved carried it in their silence. Reed carried it in his suspicion. She carried it in every step, every breath, every night she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her secret was no longer hers alone. And sooner or later, secrets demanded a price. The interrogation room was colder than the desert outside. A single light buzzed overhead, casting shadows sharp against the concrete walls. Fallon sat in the center, hands folded on the table, her face as calm as always. Colonel Reed paced slowly, file in hand. His boots struck the floor like a clock counting down. Collins, he began, voice low, deliberate, I've read every report. I've cross-checked every log, and I keep circling back to you. You with the map spread across your desk at midnight. You with the technical manuals you shouldn't need. You with the habit of walking the perimeter when no one else does. Always at the edges. Always unseen. He stopped, leaning across the table, his eyes bored into hers. Tell me the truth. Were you in those ravines? The silence stretched. Fallon's heartbeat was steady, but her throat felt tight. She could lie. She could deny. But she also knew something else Reed already believed. Proof or not, he believed. Before she could answer, the door opened. Staff Sergeant Morrison entered, his crutch clicking softly against the floor. Behind him, 2 more Marines from Bravo 7, their faces pale from healing wounds, but their eyes sharp. Colonel, Morrison said, his tone respectful but unyielding. Permission to speak. Reed frowned. This is an interrogation. You have no standing here. With respect, sir, Morrison pressed, I do, because I was there. He stepped forward, planting himself between Reed and Fallon. We were dying in that ravine, and then someone came. Someone who knew what to do when no one else could. That person saved 12 Marines. That's the only truth that matters. Reed's jaw tightened. And who was it? Morrison hesitated. His eyes flicked to Fallon just for a moment. She didn't move, didn't plead, just watched him calm, almost resigned. Finally, he turned back to Reed. His voice was steady. I don't know, they never gave me a name. The other Marines echoed softly, one after another. Never saw their face. Don't know who it was. A phantom, sir, that's all. The room hung heavy with the weight of their words. Reed studied them, then Fallon. Suspicion simmered in his eyes, but something else crept in, too, the faintest trace of respect. He closed the file slowly. Very well, if no one will speak, then it ends here. He leaned closer to Fallon, his voice low, meant only for her. But understand this, Collins. Phantom 7 may have saved them, but one day ghosts always come into the light. Then he left, boots striking the floor with finality. The Marines lingered. Morrison's gaze met Fallon's one last time. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But the silence between them carried everything. Gratitude, loyalty, respect. And a promise never to speak her name. When they were gone, Fallon sat alone. The walls pressed close, but her chest felt lighter. She had been seen, yet still hidden. Known, yet unnamed. That night she walked the perimeter again. The desert stretched endless beneath the stars, quiet and vast. Her body still ached from the ravines. Her hands were still raw, bandaged beneath her gloves, but her mind was steady. She thought of Bravo 7, alive because she had refused silence. She thought of Reed, torn between suspicion and admiration. She thought of herself, caught forever in the space between invisible and unforgettable. And as the wind swept the sand across her boots, she understood something she had always known but never said. Recognition wasn't the point. Titles weren't the point. Dignity didn't demand applause. It acted quietly, fiercely, without permission. Sometimes the greatest victories left no record. Sometimes the strongest names were the ones never spoken. And sometimes, a whisper in the dark was enough to carry 12 men home. She walked on, her silhouette small against the desert horizon, a figure no one turned to see, a presence no one applauded. But in the silence of the night, in the memory of 12 Marines who would never forget her voice, the legend lived. Not Fallon Collins, not the analyst who was ignored, but the phantom who came when hope was gone. Phantom 7. And in that there was enough.